Hello my fellow Archons and welcome to another video. I know it's a month late, but I wanted to share with you guys my experience of GenCon 2023. The KeyForge US Nationals were held at GenCon this year, and I was able to compete in that event while enjoying the full 4-day celebration of gaming. This was my first ever GenCon, and I've gotta say I absolutely loved it. Tens of thousands of people all gathered in one place to revel in the joys of gaming and socialize with other gamers. Now, I'm not really much of a gamer myself. I don't really play any other games at all besides KeyForge, but even I loved touring the booths, meeting people who had only ever interacted with online, and playing KeyForge in a literal stadium. Without further ado, let's begin. Before arriving, I knew GenCon was going to be big. I'd asked around about what GenCon was like before buying my ticket, and everyone confirmed that the event would be huge. But when I got there and began exploring the place, it was far more massive than I could have expected. The event took place at the Indianapolis Convention Center, and it was just a sea of heads in all directions as far as the eye could see. You had to navigate literal rivers of people to tour the booths in the exhibition hall, live music played in the hallways, numerous incredibly skilled cosplayers roamed about, a massive castle-like structure made from magic cards sat precariously among the crowds, and fierce competition abounded in the colossal gaming hall. Again, I was there mostly for the KeyForge. Ghost Galaxy's KeyForge US Nationals took place on Friday of that weekend, in a true sports stadium. The Lucas Oil Stadium to be exact. I cannot express to you how cool it felt entering the stadium from one of the side hallways, walking into this enormous play area. Stands surrounding you on all sides, gigantic jumbotron screens playing ads for different games and even occasional live footage of the stadium, tables upon tables for a variety of games, one of which being, you guessed it, KeyForge. It was truly a sight to behold. The footage doesn't do the scale of the place justice, but it was incredible. It really added to the feeling of us gamers have finally made it. We're in the big leagues. This is some truly high-level play, apparently worthy of taking place in a legendary stadium. For the Nationals, I chose to play with Chopibro, the Combatant of Gold. This is one of my better known decks among the community, an AoE deck ranked 98 stats when I first opened it that has since dropped down to 95 after the Winds of Exchange update. This was my first time bringing Chopibro into a truly competitive environment. Before the event, I'd done a lot of deliberation on which deck I wanted to pilot because Chopibro has a lot of weaknesses. Its biggest flaw is that of board control, which is pretty light on. If the opponent ever drops a threat on the board and protects it well, Chopibro can really struggle to remove it, and that's where it can start to fall short. Things like Odoat can shut it down big time. The lack of artifact control can be pretty painful as well. However, the deck is lightning fast, has a decent amount of archiving, contains Brig, and plenty of out-of-hand options to combo with TMTP. The Sanctum is insanely fun and is hugely synergistic with the Shadows. The proc can be super annoying to work around, especially with all the steel I have in Shadows, and the Lights Out is usually absolutely critical. Overall, the deck can move really fast and control Ember extremely well, but has a lot of bad matchups and can fall short in a lot of areas. Despite that, I really wanted to rep some AoE in a high-level tournament and see what Chopibro could truly do. The tournament began with the organizers announcing that we were still using the cancerous double elimination format. This event happened before GG did away with double elimination and introduced the 2LO format, but it's what was used for Nationals. Safe to say, no one was happy about that, and sure enough, the very first round was paired up, and 90% of us got a round 1 bye. Literally for the first round, only 6 or so out of over 60 competitors actually got to play. The rest of us just sat around waiting, and I was among them. Let's just say, I am so glad Ghost Galaxy finally did away with this stupid format. So round 1 ended and we went into round 2, and I actually got to play in this one. I was up against a player named Arlie, and he was also using an AoE deck. This one was full of nasty Exhume shenanigans, helper bots, Ronnies. It was a super painful deck to play against. As is typical for my sort of luck, I never drew into my Brig, and both of us were constantly being super careful about how much we checked that to avoid Ronnies and TMTPs. It was a long game of chicken. Ultimately, I was simply outclassed and outplayed, and though I did get to forge a key, I did end up losing that one. It was a very interesting game for sure. Then I got another bye, and after that second bye, the event took a break for lunch. It was a long day of waiting around so far. I took the break time to explore the exhibition hall, then came back for my next round, which I amazingly actually got to play in. This time I was up against a Worlds Collide deck. As I scanned the deck list, I realized that it wouldn't be able to survive Brig if I could draw into it. It contained the classic diabolical Starlines logo shenanigans you often see in Worlds Collide decks, and I knew it would be another tough match. As the match progressed, I actually drew into Brig somewhat quickly for once, and I waited patiently for the ideal time to use it. Meanwhile, my opponent was going crazy with archiving, playing Tautau Vapors after Tautau Vapors, building up a terrifying archive. I had Brig ready to go, and he picked up his archives. A truly massive Starlines turn ensued, ending with a truly dreaded card that I didn't foresee the impact of while scanning his deck list, a Stealth Mode. Him playing Stealth Mode in that moment, preventing me from playing action cards, is legitimately what lost me the game. I literally had the next few turns all set up and ready to go, all of it hinging on Brig. I had answers prepared, key cards stashed away, but Stealth Mode ruined all of it. He was checking for a second key and was well on his way to his third, but I couldn't do anything to stop it or capitalize on it. I 100% could have won that game, but ended up losing. I was 0-2, which meant I was knocked out of the bracket. Bye, loss, bye, break, loss. It was an arduous afternoon of sitting around for hours on end and losing, but at least I got to participate in some second Ember games afterwards. Those I performed much better in, taking the W in 4 or 5 games of that, and winning a figurine as a prize when all was said and done. That day was also the day I opened my double Cursed Relic deck that I made a video about, so popping that glorious deck definitely made up for all my losses earlier. And so ended my run in the KeyForge US Nationals. The next day was my free day. I didn't have any events planned except a couple sealed deck sit and go tournaments ran by Board Crunch. Those I also performed pretty well in. The first one I went undefeated 3-0, winning myself these cool Saurian themed card sleeves and a really neat custom Ecodon playmat. They had playmats for all the houses, but I had to rep the newest house in the game. The second one I had a 1-2 record, so I didn't win anything, but it was still great getting to meet fellow KeyForge fans, and a few were even a fan of the channel, which is really cool. Overall, Saturday was a pretty chill day. I opened some more Winds of Exchange and Unchained decks, and just hung around. Then Sunday arrived, and Ghost Galaxy was hosting another KeyForge event I signed up for, the Sealed Token Creature Face-Off. This super unique event had you open 3 sealed WoE decks to craft an alliance deck with, then you were allowed to include any one of the 28 token creatures available across the whole set to add into your alliance. Whether your decks included that token or not, you could use whichever one you wanted, which added a really cool twist. You just had to change your token creature each round, meaning you couldn't go 2 rounds with the same token. You would never use the same token twice. GG really pushed the fact that this was meant to be more of a fun, casual tournament setting, so the stakes weren't that high or anything, kept things more nice and relaxed. I won't go through all my pods in super high detail, but my final deck included Mars, Star Alliance, and Ecodon, with some cool tools I was pretty happy with. The Mars pod was especially neat. It had both a Legacy and an Anomaly. Legacy Killzord Mark 9001, and a Curse of Forgetfulness, which had the old pre-errata effect of purging a random card from the discard pile rather than the top card of the discard pile. It also had Ether Spider, Memrox, and double Ironix Rebel, alongside some OK board removal. The Star Alliance, meanwhile, had some pretty epic doubles, most notably the double Ganymede Outpost, enabling some mad efficiency and archiving capability, synergizing perfectly with the Memrox in the Mars house. It also had double Hawkins for some burst, double Future Booster, and double Guthrak. The rest of the pod was pretty mid, but it had enough power cards and synergy with the Mars to hook my interest. And lastly, the Ecodon had CDN, Generous Offer, and Shrewd Investor, along with a couple of vendors, a couple of forced retirements, a pull-up stakes, and an Equigi Outpost as a cherry on top. Overall, my deck was a little light on the board control, but I felt pretty good in most of the other important areas. This deck just wanted to cycle fast and race like the wind. And as I often do, I went the easy route and chose Prospector as my first token, and it helped that I did have Ecodon in my deck. Round 1, I got my 2 Ganymede Outposts down early, and I was able to execute my game plan with Memrox pretty perfectly. I used his action for 6 to 8 Ember a couple times, and that speed was easily enough to get me the win. As I played, I realized that my deck hardly generated any tokens. That whole match I made maybe 1 or 2 Prospectors, which I didn't mind too much honestly. I didn't particularly want to risk my Outposts or Memrox getting tokenized anyway. Round 2, I went with the Emberling token. I knew I wouldn't be making very many of them, so on the off chance that I did, at least it would act as an extra Ember on the board. It was an insanely tight match. My opponent had 2 Rant and Rives, which he used to punish one of my big bursts about halfway through the game. A little later, my Curse of Forgetfulness, under his control, purged his R&R from his discard pile. At the time, we were using its pre-errata effect, so at the end of each of his turns, he was shuffling it and purging a random card from it. Then, near the end of the game, we were both fighting for our 3rd keys. He checked for his 3rd, and in a last-ditch effort, I was able to take him off check and put myself into check. However, I checked at over 8 Ember, and it just so happened that he had a 2nd copy of Rant and Rive, which he played to put me back below 6 and him back into check. I just wasn't careful and didn't respect the potential for him to have a 2nd R&R. Bad play on my end, but it was still a super tight and fun match. And for the 3rd round, well, the 3rd round was just sad. This time I went with the Cleric token, for a little extra Ember control whenever I happened to make a token, but it was all meaningless. Turn 1, my opponent dropped a Fathom Reaver. Then, on his subsequent turn, he dropped 2 more Fathom Reavers. So 2 turns into the match, I was facing down a board of 6 unfathomable creatures and was only drawing up to 3 cards when my turns ended. That right there was practically the end of the game. I didn't draw anything useful. I was smoked straight out the gate. My opponent high-rolled big time, and there was just nothing I could do about it. And so my time in the KeyForge Sealed Token Creature Face-Off ended. Despite my unfortunate losses, I still had an awesome time. I think it's a very cool format, and I would love to see more of it in the future, or really any unique twist like that. If I had played a little better, I think I could have improved my record, but either way, the event was super enjoyable. And honestly, that about does it for my time at GenCon. It was awesome getting to meet some of you guys while I was there, putting faces to names, and getting to hang out with the KeyForge community. And I did really enjoy getting some more exposure to the gaming community as a whole. The entire event was awesome, there was so much to do and explore, I barely got to see a fraction of everything that went on there. I definitely hope to go next year if time allows. Huge shout out to the guys that let me room with them over the weekend, and to House of Brainator on YouTube who was also there and who I got to hang out with quite a bit. GenCon 2023 was an absolute blast. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all again in the next one. And once again, don't forget that channel memberships are now available for the Aembermedes YouTube channel, granting access to all sorts of exclusive content. See you later!